Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutare Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunnivari Paschatya Satanini. So today the topic is aparadha, correct?
Yes, yes.
Focus.
1 for 2.
1 for 2. Buy one, get
2
2.
for 1, or 2 for 1, whatever.
Buy one, get one free. Yeah.
Exactly.
Specifically focusing on Vaishnava Parad. Is that the idea? Or
Well, that's what we've been focusing all the time. No? We're very, very efficient. I'm very efficient. That's my main focus.
how to decrease your efficiency in Vaishnava Parad. How to become handicapped in Vaishnava Parad. So I was joking with Doyal Gauranga that the first offense is to blaspheme the devotees. So it's actually 2 offenses in one, because it's an offense to the holy name, and of course an offense to the devotee. So buy one, get one free kind of thing. So we're going to focus on that, but first, when we look at the 10 offenses, we see that they are offenses. Only the 10th offense is an offense while chanting. The other offenses are offenses in action or offenses in attitude, which is interesting. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur explained why an offense, of which generally Vaishnava Aparadha is a verbal offense. It can be a mental offense. It's also a mental offense. It increases in its power when it's a verbal offense. Why would something that doesn't seem related to chanting be an offense to the holy name? So Bhaktivinoda Thakur has said that because the devotee is in Krishna's heart, then if I offend the devotee, I'm offending Krishna's heart. So it's interesting because on one hand, we're chanting the holy name, and on the other hand, we could be offending the holy name by offending the devotee who's dear to Krishna, who is the holy name. So it's like, on one hand, I'm massaging you, on one hand, I'm punching you in the face, basically. So the offenses are something like that. We're chanting, and on the other hand, we're doing something which is minimizing our chanting or directly offending Krishna or offending his devotees, which is a direct offense. So the word aparadha, if we divide it by apa and radha, it means to be distanced from worship. Or if you want to be more specific, like instead of anuradha, we don't want to change your name to aparadha. You want to keep it as anuradha, right? I hope. So, but aparadha is really the opposite of anuradha. Anu means to follow, and apa means to distance. So when we make offense, it it creates a distance in our worship, or it creates a distance between ourselves and Radha, by whose mercy we get Krishna. So that's the meaning of aparad. And it's a very unusual thing, at least for me, from my perspective of observation, because when we read Srimad Bhagavatam, there are multiple examples of devotees or transcendentalists whose lives were partially or fully, or their spiritual lives and material, partially or fully destroyed by creating an offense. And you would think with all those examples, we would be very concerned about offending devotees. You have, but it's kind of like the warning on the cigarette label. Basically, the warning says these cigarettes will kill you, and people buy them anyway. It's like, whatever. So it's kind of like, we've got the warning, this operato will kill you. And it's like, yeah, but he's did this and he did that, and we kind of just continue. It's interesting, don't you think? Have you noticed that? Warning, warning after warning after warning, don't do this. And, we get upset and we do it. So before we begin talking more about it, there's two things I wanted to clarify. One thing which is interesting is that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta did not qualify an offense to the holy name just because you made it. He qualified it as because you tried not to make it. In other words, sometimes we will make offense, like inattention. It happens. Even we're trying not to be inattentive. Or sometimes we get upset. Our devotee does something where we become a little angry. We say something. And then we regret it, and we make an effort to correct ourselves. So he said that if you're making an effort to avoid the offenses, it's not considered an offense, even if you make the offense. Of course, it's not. This doesn't mean it's a license to commit any of the offenses. But this is the primary point, because sometimes we make offense, even though we're trying not to. And all we can do is try not to. And that's all we can do. I mean, that's the best we can do, is make every effort to not make the offense. So he considered that not to be an offense if the effort is made. So once we stop making the effort to avoid the offenses, that's considered offense. The other point is that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he defines the difference between criticism and not criticism, even when you're quote unquote criticizing, because anytime we talk about criticism, devotees will say, but sometimes, we need to correct. So, and when we say don't criticize, and there's so many stories, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and Srila Prabhupada would not listen to criticism of their disciples, even their disciples did something wrong. They wouldn't allow the devotees to complain. And then, we think, but the devotee is doing something wrong and it's upsetting the community, and I'm just bringing it to the attention of the authorities. How could that be criticism? And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur says it's not criticism, because it's not ill-intentioned. When it's ill-intentioned, then it's criticism. And then the next question is, what is the difference between criticism and blasphemy? Well, I would say blasphemy is just criticism taken up a few notches, criticism on steroids. The dictionary definition of blasphemy is much worse than criticism. It's to the point where you're publicly berating a devotee, especially for things they did not do or may not have done, or for which you have no evidence that they did it. You start making up stories about someone. And so we've seen that on the internet. Don't believe everything you read on Facebook. There are people out there who wear tilak and kantamala, who make up stories about devotees, say things that aren't true. That's to shed very dark light on a devotee. There are devotees who critique the lives and actions of devotees without actually knowing what those devotees are doing and why they do it. That's more what we call blasphemy. It's ill-motivated, and its intention is to destroy a person, destroy their reputation, put them down, minimize them, and also with an intention to make give ourselves a better position. But we find both of those things going on today. Sometimes we criticize just want to put somebody down, we want to look better, and so we criticize. And sometimes we just dislike someone. We dislike leadership. We dislike what's going on in ISKCON. And then anyone who becomes a leader is subject to being criticized or worse. And if you've ever been a leader, you know this. And if you ever want to become a leader, you need a little bit of tough skin, because you will be criticized. Just for exist, you'll be criticized for the fact that you exist. Not necessarily for what you do, but just that you're a leader. People have issues with leadership. Mahamani, can you turn off your microphone? I think there's noise coming from there. Background noise. Yeah, thank you. Big Jewel, Mahamani. You know, our names are interesting. We wouldn't really call one another by our names in English. You know, I have a friend, he calls me Big Soul. Hey, Big Soul. Hey, Big Jewel. It doesn't translate so well in English. They work well in Sanskrit. Yeah. So if we're going to talk about the first offense, I think the best thing we can discuss is why we make that offense. Like where's it coming from? What are we trying to accomplish? What kind of conditioning is it coming from? And also, it's important to understand that I think we all notice that sometimes we expect that we should be more Krishna conscious than we are. I mean, we've been chanting for so many years, and we often see a lot of dirty things in our heart, or actions or attachments, which we think we should have transcended by now. And we see that in other people, isn't it? I think after all these years, you know, and my mind is still thinking about this or that. Have you ever thought like that? Like what's going on here? And I think a lot of devotees also expect a lot from leaders who've been devotees for decades and decades and decades and decades. And sometimes they see behavior that is not indicative of what they would think is an advanced stage of Krishna consciousness. And it's confusing. Sometimes it's discouraging, thinking, well, you know, does the Maha Mantra work? I mean, this person's been a devotee so many years, and now I see he just became really, really upset about a very, very little thing. Have you ever thought like that? Like, never doubt, like, does it actually work? Or are we just like bewildering ourselves, we just think it works, it actually doesn't. Well, it does work and it doesn't work. And it doesn't work when we commit offenses, and it does work when we don't. So this is very important. And it's hard to talk about this because now it sounds like I'm making offenses to devotees, because I just said some advanced devotees don't act like advanced devotees. That seems like an offense, right? I'm trying to make this more academic, and I can use an example in which a devotee had some serious problems, and he wrote Prabhupada a letter explaining his problems. And I've had a godbrother who did the same thing with Prabhupada. And Prabhupada's reply is, follow the principles, chant 16 rounds, do Sankirtan, service, and so forth. And in another letter, Prabhupada said, when he saw the symptoms, he said, it must be that you're committing offense to the holy name. So it's something like your doctor tells you, drink a gallon of water every day, exercise for an hour, only eat salads this week, take these vitamins. And then you come and see him the next week and he says, how do you feel? And you say, I feel horrible. I'm still tired. I still have headaches. And the doctor's going to think, wait a minute. Did you take the water? Did you take all the vitamins? And then it sounds like you didn't, because everyone who takes these gets better. And then you say, well, actually, I was only drinking 1 cup of water and I forgot most of the time to take the vitamins, and I couldn't just eat salad. So I was eating cake with the salad. And like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So it's a little bit like that, maybe not a little bit. It's very much like that with the holy name. You know, okay, I've been chanting for so many years, and if I see a lack of spiritual health, then first place I would always go to is, are you offending the holy name? Or because when we offend the holy name, then Shastra says, well, Shastra doesn't say it exactly like this. I say it. It's like trying to get a suntan at midnight. I don't think that's possible, is it? The sun has set and you're trying to get a suntan. So it's like the sunshine of the holy name, it is not manifest where there's offense. And so we use this example of suntan. Your guru is trying to give you help you get a suntan. He says, go out in the sun at noon, you'll get a suntan. And the sun at noon is Shudhanam, and the sun at midnight is Namaparad, and the sun at twilight is Namabas. So there's some light there. So if we're trying to get a suntan at midnight, it's not going to happen. And so sometimes our chanting is offensive and we don't experience the power of the holy name. And sometimes our chanting is not offensive. And after we finish our rounds, we think, wow, that was amazing. If I chant like this every day, I'd probably go, I'll probably be a pure devotee by next Thursday. Isn't it? Do you ever feel like that? Again, if I chanted like this every day, well, I think I could make the world Krishna conscious, this year. And the other way of chanting, if I chant like this every day, I'm just going to go, I'll probably never be Krishna conscious. I'll never overcome my anarthas. So this is important to understand. It's more than important to understand because we're chanting every day and we have to look at the symptoms. And if the symptoms are there of strong material attachment, strong material desire, we're not feeling fulfilled, satisfied. These are all symptoms that something is wrong with our spiritual life. And I know that's not really spoken about openly because it sounds like I'm offending people or I'm judging people. But I think it's important to discuss this because it is a fact. And understanding this can be an impetus to improve our chanting to avoid offenses. Knowing that we have something, well, it's like I give you $1,000 and I tell you, there's certain investments you could make. With this $1,000 in 10 years, you'd have $10 million. Like, wow. Or in 10 years, you'd be in debt $10 million. It's also possible, right? So the holy name is something like that. It's got potential, but you have to know how to invest it. And if you don't invest it properly, you don't get the potential. And then it seems like it's not working. And then we ask questions, does it really work? I mean, is this whole Hare Krishna movement bogus? And one of the offenses to the holy name is to not have faith in the holy name. And I can't think of a better way not to have faith in the holy name than to make offenses to it. Because when you make offenses to it, it's just the sound. And the Krishna is there in the sound, but you don't know it. You're not experiencing it. It's midnight right now for you. Midnight japa. And so you would doubt, does his holy name really work? Is Krishna really there? I'm not experiencing it. Vice versa, when you avoid offenses, you experience it. You have amazing experiences, amazing realizations. 16 rounds is like, well, that was appetizer. Let's continue. I can't stop. I think we've all been on both sides of the coin. I don't wish you were on the dark side, but I hope you've been on the bright side also. And because we've been on both sides, we know what I'm talking about. And so if you think what Prabhupada is giving, and if you think what he wants us to achieve, it's no easy task. And you need something very powerful. to overcome Maya, because Maya is insurmountable, basically. And we see that as soon as the devotee becomes slack, everything goes downhill. We see it again and again and again. And we also see as soon as the devotee is doing really well, even though they're young devotees, it's like they're immune to Maya. The virus of Maya doesn't affect them. So it's very, very important to acknowledge that chanting the holy name is the most important practice. All the 9 practices are contained in it. Prabhupada said, it's the essence of our philosophy. Togira Swami, it's your link, your japa means are your link to Krishna. So Sacinandana Swami said, Prabhupada said, 90% of your advancement is chanting. It's not that we don't do anything else. But when we understand these things, then aparad takes on a different perspective, realizing that if I commit offense, then the thing, this valuable asset, which could be invested and produce dividends of love of God, could just get me in debt spiritually, and I could be completely a puppet in Maya's hands by not chanting properly. And so this is we just see it in advanced devotees. You see how they chant. If you're around advanced devotees, just look at them, see how they chant. They're not in this world when they're chanting. They're not in the body. They don't know what time it is, where they are. They're there with Krishna. That's where they are. And those who are not chanting well, they're completely in the material world, completely aware of their minds, their surroundings. They're just trying to get their rounds done. These are symptoms of problems. So I just wanted to create that foundation before we talk about this offense, because it's important. So in my study of Vaishnava Aparad and my study of humility, they cross together, humility, Vaishnava Aparad, because Vaishnava Aparad, according to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, stems from a lack of humility. And there may be psychological reasons we criticize because we want to pull people down to feel better. But if you're going to put them all into one package, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta says it's a lack of humility. So this is an interesting thing for us to recognize, because I think sometimes when we criticize, we don't recognize why we're doing it. And I know for myself, sometimes when I criticize, it makes me feel smart. So I'm so smart that I can see what's wrong with you. Do you ever feel like that? Nobody can see what's wrong with Doyal Gauranga. Only Mahatma can see it, because Mahatma is so smart. That's why I can find out what's wrong with him, because I'm intelligent. So I'm finding fault with Doyal Gauranga, when the consequence is that I'm thinking the reason I'm doing it is because I've just got a high IQ, and this guy should be in charge of ISKCON because I see what other people don't see. I mean, I see all the faults with so many people that we should just get them out of their position because I'm so smart. And so, have you ever felt that way? Kind of like enlightened? You see the fault because you're more enlightened, and all the fools and dull-headed devotees don't. Do you ever feel like that? Okay, you don't have to admit it. I will admit it myself. You may or may not want to admit it. But anyway, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is saying that tendency to see the bad in others, unless it has some magnanimous purpose, like we're trying to help this devotee, or he said, it's destroying me or disturbing me, or it's disturbing other devotees, and I want to correct that, and there's no ill intention. He said, otherwise it's an offense, and otherwise it's, Bhaktisiddhanta said, Saraswati Thakur said, it's coming from pride. Now, it's extremely destructive. It's so destructive that if I were in charge of ISKCON, I would make Vaishnava Aparad illegal. Like, you can't stay in ISKCON if you make Vaishnava. You have to go, you have to leave. And basically that's what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did, because he wouldn't let anybody criticize. If they start to criticize, stop. He'd stop them. And he would glorify the devotee they were criticizing, because he wanted to teach a lesson that we should glorify devotees. Isn't that interesting? And there are many, many stories where somebody would be saying, so-and-so's not doing this, or he's doing this wrong. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta would glorify that devotee for the very thing he was doing wrong. And I'll give you one story. I don't know if I told you this. It's one of the most amazing stories I've ever heard. One of the senior brahmacharis wasn't chanting his rounds, and they went to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and said, he's not chanting his rounds. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, is he doing service? And they said, yeah, he's engaged all day. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, just see how much bhakti he has. He said, he has more bhakti than I have, because if I didn't chant my rounds, I would not have the strength to do service all day. He's not chanting his rounds and he's doing service all day. Just see how advanced he is. He's got so much bhakti, he doesn't even need to chant. He's got like an unlimited well of bhakti, he doesn't need to chant. Isn't that interesting? Like, have you ever thought like that? You see some devotee and he's not chanting his rounds and you think, wow, what a great devotee he is. If I didn't do that, I'd fall. No, we think, kick that guy out of here. Let's get on the internet and tell the world that he's not chanting his rounds. Yeah. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was teaching a lesson. We should glorify devotees. And then he said, you don't have a right to fault a devotee, unless, we're saying that it's disrupting the community in some way. You don't have a right to fault him, even if he's at fault, because fault finding is not the culture of Vaishnavism. It's the culture of appreciation. So seeing that example, I think it sends a huge message, at least it did to me, that this fault finding and bringing down devotees is worse than we thought. And you can't glorify and fault find at the same time. So when you're fault finding, you're not glorifying. And when you're glorifying, you're not fault finding. So do the math, maybe it's better we do more glorifying. That would kind of curb our tendency. We wouldn't have time to find fault. But if we have time to find fault, no time to glorify. I've done some experimentation, not purposely, but by accident. And in our forgiveness workshop, we asked devotees to appreciate the person that they're trying to forgive, or by that time in the workshop, they already have forgiven that person. And so after we do the exercise, which is hard for some people because they have an issue with this person and now they're being asked to appreciate them. But everybody does it. And then when we share, people say that, I didn't really want to appreciate this person, or I couldn't imagine appreciating after so many years of holding on to resentment. But they said, my experience was that my heart changed through appreciation. It was like a sadhana. It was like heart purification. My attitude towards the person, the negativity, turned into something positive when I appreciated him. And I didn't even realize how powerful appreciation was till we did this exercise. I've done the workshop many times, so I get to hear the sharing, and the sharing is always pretty much the same, that the appreciation neutralized my negativity towards a person. Now, in Shastra, it is said, don't listen to blasphemy of devotee. Not only don't speak it, don't hear it. Because if you hear it, you know what happens? But many bad things happen. It's considered an offense to hear. But when we hear blasphemy of another devotee, what happens is all these negative feelings, not just ideas, but feelings towards the devotee, and any arise. And the faith we had in that devotee starts to diminish. Even if those stories are false, when you hear them, your faith in that devotee diminishes, and then your tendency to criticize that devotee will increase, isn't it? So it's the opposite of appreciation. We saw in appreciation, the tendency to criticize was minimized, the tendency to appreciate increased. In criticism, the tendency to appreciate decreases, the tendency to criticize, it just festers. It feeds itself. So let's look at what our Shastra says about how to associate with devotees. And of course, we should serve superiors, but we should serve all devotees. It's, the three exchanges is all different forms of service. But specifically, the Shastra says that you want to get the association of advanced devotees. The more advanced, the better. Why? Because they have special Shakti to give you mercy. That's the main idea in hearing from advanced devotees and serving them. And so our Shastra says, don't, the saffron dust particles of Krishna's lotus feet come in their words. And there's so much discussion about how when you serve a Vaishnava, you get Krishna's mercy, you get blessed. And now it's Damodar month. And we see that what can a Vaishnava do if they show favor to you? Nalakuvarimani Griva, they didn't deserve anything. They didn't deserve to see Krishna. No way. They did nothing. But Narada Muni thought, they're sons of Kuvera, this is not right. I'm going to teach them a lesson and give them mercy. And in the story of Damodar, I believe it's a commentary by the Acharyas, maybe Srila Prabhupada. But anyway, it is said that Krishna actually had no business blessing Nalakuvarimani Griva. There was no reason. They didn't do anything to receive their blessings, receive his blessings. But because Narada Muni wanted to bless them, the devotee always, Krishna always follows the will and desire of the devotee. So if the devotee wants to bless someone, then Krishna will bless them. So Krishna, in liberating Nalakuvarimani Griva, was just following the desire of Narada. So if Narada wants to bless you, you're good. You got your ticket back to Godhead, everything's going to be great. If any devotee wants to bless you, you're good. And how do you get the blessings? Well, sometimes it just comes because they favor you, but more often it comes because of your attitude and your service and your hearing from that Vaishnava. And automatically by the system, Krishna's pleased, you please the Vaishnava, Krishna's pleased, you get his blessings. There's a whole system going on, which we don't see with our eye, but it's a divine system. And that's why Prabhupada said, pleasing the spiritual master is the secret of success. You please him, you please Krishna, you're good. You offend him, you offend Krishna, you're not good. It's pretty simple, isn't it? One way you go up, one way you go down. So in the way I personally see it in our Shastra, when you see all these descriptions of pleasing the Guru, and by pleasing the Guru, pleasing the Vaishnavas, getting their mercy, when you get their well wishes, their blessings, everything is good. Your life is good. Your spiritual life is easy. And if you don't get those blessings, then your spiritual life is difficult or impossible. What to speak if they curse you, or what to speak if you offend them. So if you look at Shastra from that perspective, you can see everything is it's like these two things are going on parallel. Devotees going up because they pleased their gurus and Krishna, and devotees going down because they offended their gurus and Krishna. And you see both things, isn't it? Doyal Gauranga and Bhagavatam, you see, like both these things are going on simultaneously. So, we really have to pay attention to that, because there's this really interesting purport. And I think most devotees may not be aware of it, because this is one word in the purport that stuck out to me, or three words. So Prabhupada is describing the process of Krishna consciousness and how to be Krishna conscious. So he's going down the basic activities of hearing and chanting and serving and spreading Krishna consciousness and rising early and so forth. And he says that if you do these things, you'll become Krishna conscious. And then he ends the sentence, this is so interesting, with, if you don't offend devotees. Like, do all these things and offend devotees, forget it. You're not going to be Krishna conscious. Do all these things, but make sure you don't offend devotees. Like, read the fine print there. It's not that you just do all these things and you become Krishna conscious. If you offend a devotee, it's not going to work, because Krishna is not going to be pleased by all those other actions which are normally pleasing to Krishna. He's not going to be pleased if we offend devotees. isn't it? So it's interesting that he inserts that right at the end, like, yeah, do all this, but don't offend devotees. If you offend devotees, that's it. And we had the unfortunate, I mean, we've seen some very advanced devotees fall down. And everyone, when it first started happening, I would say everyone thought this is unbelievable. We couldn't imagine in a million lifetimes that this devotee could for a moment not be Krishna conscious. But it was an example that Krishna put before us for all of us to note. These devotees were very successful. And they started becoming proud of their success. Practically everyone that fell went through the same pattern. They became gurus, lots of disciples. If their godbrothers didn't, just submit to them, they wouldn't want to work with them, criticize them, wouldn't allow them to be in their zone. Their zones were extremely successful. They were becoming proud. They started becoming critical, more proud, more critical, and then they broke the regulative principles. That was just like the same story for all of them. It just, the details are different, but the basic story was the same. And we're looking at this. What a lesson for us. And when I became a guru, there was a training and this was discussed. Be careful when you become a guru, this could happen. And I was thinking, we have so many examples of this happening. I am fortunate. I'm not a guinea pig of the first 11 gurus. I've got this example in front of me. It's so clear what happened. Don't become proud, because when you become proud, what's the next thing you do? You start offending devotees. Humble devotees don't offend devotees. This kind of, that kind of devotee is just like, the only thing that comes out of their mouth is just like Krishna Katha and glorifying devotees. That kind of devotee? Like nobody knows them. They're just the pot washer or the cook or whatever, isn't it? And they're the ones that, gentle and like, but when we become proud of our accomplishments, then criticism is there. Even Prabhupada, when he was with his godbrothers in the last days, he said, please forgive me. I criticized you. I became a little proud of my success. That was his own words. So he's saying the same thing. Of course, they said, you never criticized us. Then Prabhupada in his humility, wanted to just smooth things out. But he made that statement, when one, becomes proud, then that's what they do. So this is something that I'm offering for us to reflect on, that our criticism is not always just because we're so smart and we see what's wrong and everybody should listen to us. And if GBC just listened to me, the movement would be so much better, and blah, blah, or my temple president. He doesn't know what he's doing. If he just listened to me, everything would be better. That's a dangerous mentality. Even if that were true, a advanced devotee wouldn't think like that. He'd think like, well, if he wants some advice, if he asks me, I'm happy to give, and otherwise I'm happy to serve. That's more. I'm not saying that we shouldn't say anything if there's something wrong, but that's more of the attitude of an advanced devotee. So whenever you have a tendency to criticize, then just reflect on this, that it just might be coming from pride to try to make yourself look good or put somebody down, and which is antithetical to the process of bhakti, completely antithetical, because we're trying to be Trinadapi Sunichin. It's not easy for sure. So that's what I wanted to say. And I said it. And now, you want me to say more? I mean, that was basically what I wanted. I mean, I could make you, I could say more and make you feel even worse than I made you feel already. But so
ecstatic, dear Mahatma Prabhu. But so we have one question already from Suresh Vardas.
Okay.
Yeah, you see it, eh?
Oh, let me go to it. Sometimes devotees offend other devotees by seeing that it disturbs me and involves offending devotee who offend other, what to do. Yeah. So he's saying, I see another devotee offending another devotee. Well, yeah, you should be disturbed, and we should not tolerate another devotee being offended. That's for sure. Just like it said, if a devotee is being attacked, we should defend them. If offended, we should speak up for them. Now, there's two problems that I've seen. This is practical. Well, one's philosophical, one's practical. Maybe they're both practical. In trying to neutralize this offense, we may commit offense. So you have to be very careful. This devotee is offensive. He's, et cetera, et cetera. And then I start making offenses to that devotee to stop him from making offenses to another devotee. So it's kind of like the Dakya Jagya, everybody's offending everybody else, So you want to avoid that. I'm sure you've seen that, right? You've seen that, Doyal Gauranga? You're trying to solve a problem by creating another problem, right? And we see that with what goes on Facebook a lot of times. That devotees are trying to correct something, but they lack culture. And so if a cultured person is trying to neutralize an offense, they will not make more offenses. But an uncultured person would, or a person who's not knowledgeable or highly conditioned will tend to make more offenses. Or, so that's one thing. We have to be careful. Another thing is, does this person want you to defend them? For example, sometimes a spiritual master may be criticized, and he may tell his disciples, don't say anything, just, because he feels like it's going to exacerbate the situation. It's just going to make it worse. And the person who's offending is just going to be, it's like you trying to defend your guru is like feeding a snake milk. It's just, he's just going to become more poisonous. But as a general principle, we should not hear offense, and we should intervene as far as possible, if we can, in a Vaishnava way, to try to work with that devotee, try to help that devotee, because the devotee who's making the offense will suffer, but also the community will suffer if offenses and criticisms are being made. Like your whole temple could suffer. Things could go bad because senior devotees are being criticized by leaders. So we have to be very, very careful, or we're allowing criticism to go on. Now, we're human beings. We criticize. You criticize your wife, she criticizes you. I criticize my friends, this and that, little stuff. I don't like your pakoras, Prabhu. You should learn to cook, so that it's not a big thing. But when we're criticizing more elevated devotees with more vehement criticism, like so-and-so's, he thinks he's a guru, but he's not. I know what he does privately. No one else. Like, well, what does he do? What's your evidence? Well, I don't have any. I just know he's doing this. That kind of stuff, it destroys the devotee, and it destroys ISKCON, and it destroys your community. So I have to be careful, because the result of offense is that, we see in Shastra, sometimes someone makes offense, the whole family's destroyed, isn't it? So I would do everything I could to keep the atmosphere in our temples free of offense. And any so-called offense is just something which is a discussion on how to solve a problem. But if someone is just freely making offenses, or even in that discussion is making offenses, we just definitely do something. We have to defend devotees. And Shastra says, you should go away, or you should defend the devotee, or if you're a Kshatriya, then you can do a tongue operation and cut out their tongue. It's actually said like that, cut out their tongue. That's for Kshatriyas. I mean, if it's necessary, Kshatriyas can use violence to resolve a situation. So I'm assuming if the blasphemy was so so horrible that it might even be necessary that a kshatriya step in. Otherwise, you try to convince the person. I don't recommend tongue cutting; it could get you in trouble. And you try to convince a person, or if you can't, you should just go away. And if someone wants, is talking to you, and you can just say, Prabhu, I'm following Raghunath Das Goswami's, principle not to hear criticism of devotees. So I should really appreciate it. Something like that. That could be a policy. I mean, that's a good example. Raghunath Das Goswami would not listen to blasphemy. It's just his vow wouldn't do it.
I just wanted to add that also, add and also ask kind of to elaborate on that. Vrindavan Das Thakur many times gives warning in Chaitanya Bhagavatam that those who take sides when two devotees fight, they go to hell, and they are doomed and everything. So that's exactly what's going on. So one thing is if non-devotee offends a devotee, but when two devotees fight, it's a very, very delicate situation, I guess. But anyway, I wanted to expand on this.
Well, it's kind of like what I was saying, the lack of culture, because then if two devotees disagree, then you get all riled up, then you'll start offending one devotee, which is why we're not supposed to side with a disagreement, right?
Yeah.
Because then we'll offend the other devotee. And Lord Chaitanya said in the Chaitanya Bhagavata, he said, when my devotee is being blasphemed, that devotee who's blaspheming, when he chants Hare Krishna, his chanting of Hare Krishna feels like he's throwing burning cinder blocks on my body. Hare Krishna. That's like one of the most amazing things. Your chanting of Hare Krishna is hurting. It's actually hurting the Lord because you're blaspheming a devotee. That's pretty heavy. That's a pretty heavy meditation, isn't it? Yeah. So it's many good devotees in ISKCON have destroyed their spiritual lives by being offensive, and they were otherwise good devotees, and exactly what happened in the Shastra, they became weak. So always respectful, even if we disagree, always respectful. There are devotees I have utmost respect for their knowledge and renunciation, but there's some things that I disagree with them on, but it doesn't mean that I would lack respect because I disagree. We're different. We see things differently, but utmost respect given to devotees. That's important.
I think that's a fine line, right? To be able to disagree with somebody and at the same time respect. And I think this is not usually something what we practice, or we used to like hate the sin, not the sinner, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't like what person do, you just outright hate the person.
Yeah. How you can not like something they do or say, but still respect them, as long as, we're not talking about some horrendous activity, but we're talking about more like common things like their views, or what, like someone may emphasize, very traditional varnashram to the point where I might think this is like taking us back to the Stone Age. This is impractical. This is not going to work. People will leave our movement if we do something like this. So I don't agree. But at the same time, I respect the devotee because he's trying to figure out how we can make the world Krishna conscious through varnashram. And he's a very good devotee, and I can see he's sincere. So that was my point of when you're, at least this is what I see as a huge problem, especially with people who were born outside of India, who weren't raised in a culture, a Vedic culture, or, somewhat Vedic. But even people in India raised that way. It's Kali Yuga. We try to solve a problem by creating a bigger problem. That's lack of culture, isn't it? So, yeah. Okay, so we have more questions?
There are a lot of questions. Yes. So I'm thinking, do you want to read it, or do you want devotees to ask themselves?
Whatever they want to do is fine.
Anyway,
I'll just,
so it is there.
I can read because it's already up here, but if anybody wants to ask, verbally, that's fine also.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is either from Sarah, Vrindavan Priya, or Anuradha, or all three of them got together and made this question. I don't know, but what is your method for when you really dislike someone viscerally? Even the thought of them or sight of them is disturbing. And there are so many practices like think of good things of them, curious what you tell devotees to do when they experience this. Yeah, I have a t-shirt. Maybe you can go to my website, Sattva Accessories, buy the t-shirt. And the t-shirt says, love all the people you hate, even if you hate to love them. So one time, I think it was, I don't know, I was Prabhupada's appearance day or disappearance day. We were talking about this. And I said, my dear devotees, I love all of you, even the ones I don't love. And so there has to be a way, as we're discussing, there has to be a way for us to at least not offend these devotees. That's minimal. What to speak of have a favorable, if you can't get favorable, at least not offend. So I can tell you the way I personally do it. I try to see their sincerity. I try to see, do they have good sadhana? Are they good devotees? Are they the service they've done? I try to think, what would Prabhupada think about them? Would he be pleased with what they're doing? Because I'm always very cautious to think that even though I like a devotee, Prabhupada might appreciate that devotee, and I don't want to dislike someone that Prabhupada likes. And I think this happens a lot because I've seen some of our God brothers who left ISKCON be criticized by people in ISKCON. And I'm always thinking, don't do that. This person was so dear to Prabhupada. And even though they left ISKCON, who are we to say that Prabhupada is not loving them as much as he always did? And if I criticize someone Prabhupada loves, that's not good, right? So I try to see them in their good parts. And personally, it's kind of like, the way I look at it is like prasadam, and you're serving prasadam, and you say, do you want some rice? Yes. Do you want some dal? Do you want, and you want this sabji? And what's in the sabji? And there's some vegetable I don't like. I said, no, thank you. I don't like the sabji. So I don't have to hate the sabji, right? I don't have to go home thinking, they tried to serve me a sabji with beets in it, and I don't like beets. This is horrible. No, it's just, I'm not going to eat it. So with a person like that, it's kind of like, okay, he thinks this way, she thinks this, she acts this way. It's not my cup of tea, so to speak. I think differently. So I just don't want to be intimate with them. I respect them from a distance. Sometimes it was so bad with Prabhupada disciples that Prabhupada would send them to different countries so they wouldn't destroy one another because they couldn't get along. But it's interesting because in all those situations, although Prabhupada's saying, you should get along, so many times he told us, get along, cooperate. But in some situations, when people couldn't get along, he didn't say, get along, cooperate. He could see that was impossible. They just need to be in different countries, different projects. So, maybe you're working in the same department with that person. It's just and you feel like we're so different. And the way they do things and what they stand for is so different from me. I can't really work with them. So maybe you just work in a different department, and then you can respect them from a distance. So the main thing is not to be critical and just recognize, okay, we're different. It's like a divorce. Sometimes, we reach a point where we're just offending one another. What's the point? It's just total hell, and it doesn't help us. So we have a divorce, and once they have the divorce, then they can be friends from a distance, and they stop criticizing one another. And then sometimes they'll say, "Oh, my wife, she was very good. We just didn't get along." Something like that. I'm having fireworks here with my camera. So, is that okay, or you want more? Did any of that resonate with you? Make some sense? Yeah. I think it's the same point. Like, don't try to solve a problem with being offensive. And I'm always looking in my life how to be in a state of consciousness which is most aligned with the way Prabhupada would want me to be. And so sometimes you have to take logistical moves in order to do that, which might be, changing a service, changing who you work with, things of that nature, because in this particular situation, even though I'm trying not to be offensive, I will be. Maybe there's a devotee and his views or her views are disturbing to you, don't agree with them. Well, then just don't listen to that devotee's classes. If they come to your temple, just don't go, because you're going to sit in class and just offend them. So sometimes we have to take those positions. I was, I've taught a course on forgiveness for many, many years. And one of the things that I got from the course by teaching it was that resentment is such a low state of consciousness that if you're trying to be Krishna conscious, even if you're just trying to be conscious, even if you're not a devotee, to hold on to resentment is so self-destructive. It's just so diametrically opposed to the consciousness you want to be in. Why would you want to hold on to it, no matter how bad the person is or how bad what they've done to you is? Still, you holding on to it is two wrongs, and it doesn't make it right. So that's another way of thinking. Okay, this person, they may be whatever they are, and I don't agree with them, but I don't want to damage myself by allowing myself to become disturbed by it, because there's a million things you can be disturbed by if you allow yourself, isn't it? So, and if we allow ourselves to be disturbed, how are we going to be Krishna conscious? And what kind of example is that to others? And how will we relate to others if we're upset? So there's some self-preservation in my answer. Self-preservation is an important part of Krishna consciousness. It's sometimes you cannot do something because you realize this is going to be self-destructive, even though it's not self-destructive for everyone. For me, it will be, and I can't do it. And you have to make those decisions sometimes, that this is just, I wish I were able to work with this devotee, but I can't. And if I do, I'll criticize, and I have to, protect myself and protect the community and just, not create a bad relationship with this person. The other thing that I've understood is that people are the way they are. And so sometimes we think, I wish that person wasn't like that. And maybe in the future they won't be, but there's probably nothing you can do about it. I mean, you could pray about it, but besides that, you might think, well, maybe they'll learn by their mistakes. Maybe they'll upset enough devotees that they'll realize that the problem is theirs. But we can't count on that. So sometimes we just have to acknowledge, this is how this devotee is, and this is how they've always been, and probably how they always will be. And I have to acknowledge that. And if it's really a disturbance to other devotees, we can bring it up with leadership and say, can you speak to them? They may not change, but perhaps they could be spoken to, and just they can maybe be more controlled about in their behavior. even though they may feel a certain way, they don't exhibit it because it's upsetting the community. Okay. I hope that helps you. Next time I go to New Vrindavan, I'll see there's nobody there. Got rid of all the people you didn't like. Only joking. Where is everybody before I leave? So it's better. And I said, better you leave. Okay. Tanisha is asking, sometimes I don't offend devotees directly, but in my mind, I start doubting or judging whenever something seems wrong to me. How to stop this mentality? Well, it's a good thing you don't say anything. So it's not as offensive. It is offensive to think, but the offense becomes much more powerful when you speak it, because there's thinking, feeling, and willing. So sometimes you actually cannot stop thinking the thought because we're conditioned souls, and until we're more purified, there's going to be a tendency to be thinking critically. But at least if you catch it there, that's good. At the same time, you're going to be affected by offensive thinking, right? So the best advice I could give is that think in terms of how in ISKCON we need to create a culture of appreciation, because that's the Vaishnava culture. And a culture of appreciation does not depend on the fact that a person has some faults. Well, I'm not going to appreciate you, Prabhu, because I counted you have 64 faults. If you only had 32, maybe I could appreciate you. Oh, you spend your time counting faults. There was actually a devotee who would count how many times the speaker in Bhagavatam class said the word ah. So Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I think it's verse 7:14, and he counted how many uhs somebody said. So, there is that mentality. But, I mean, that's the mentality we bring. And I think one of the reasons it's hard to appreciate, Tanisha, is because we have high expectations of devotees. And so we tend to be judgmental. I mean, if you think of your life before you were a devotee, you probably didn't have such high expectations of your friends, right? Isn't it? Your friend says, you say, what did you do last night? You say, oh, I went to the bar and we partied. And you go like, oh, cool. What if a devotee told you that? You'd say, where's the GBC? We got to report them. This is horrible. ISKCON is going to hell. I hate this. So we have different standards, which lends itself to us being more judgmental of one another because we expect so much from one another. But if we're a little, like Prabhupada said, be what were the exact words? Hard on yourself and soft on others, something like that. Strict with yourself, tolerant with others. So that's an important principle. And we're all human, so let's accept our human frailties as a reality. And we're all trying, and let's see the devotee in terms of how they're trying. And let's understand how important appreciation is for our spiritual life and for the culture of ISKCON. And let's try to create more of a culture of appreciation, because criticizing devotee, it's really, whenever we criticize, we should stop and think, what is wrong with me? Why am I doing this? And start introspecting. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, other people's faults are going to bewilder you. They're going to delude you. They're going to misguide you. Isn't that interesting? He used the word bewilder, misguide, delude. That's what happens when you focus on another person's faults. So he said, when that happens, introspect and try to improve yourself. But specifically, I think it's really powerful when we're criticizing, or sometimes, do you ever have this tendency, like all day, all you do is just be grumpy and like, everything's bad. The prasadam was cold. The prasadam room was cold, and there's a burned out light bulb, and the rice was burned. Mangalarji started 32 seconds late. And, it's like the whole day you're just rah, 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 right? Of course, some people, they're like that 24/7 their whole life, but we came out of the womb like that. But, if you ever notice you're like that, why? What's happening? Something's wrong, isn't it? And so when we get that way, rather than think there's something wrong with the person, I would rather think there's something wrong with me, that I'm noticing what's wrong with the person. Number two, there may be nothing wrong with the person, just maybe me. But even if there is something wrong with the person, why am I noticing it? Why do I notice that? Like, what's wrong with me? There was one person who said something I like. He kind of a devotee of sorts. He said, when you criticize, it says more about you than it does about them. And it says about you what? That you need to criticize. Okay, you may have a fault, but I'm criticizing you, so it says more about me and my need. Why do I need to criticize you for your fault? So I think that's important, that when we're criticizing, we stop and we start reflecting, like, why am I doing this? What's going on? Is this devotee outdoing me and I want to bring them down? Do I feel insecure? Am I proud? I want the spotlight on me, but now it's on them. Or am I genuinely concerned about this devotee because they're doing something wrong? Am I genuinely concerned about the devotees in our temple because of this devotee's behavior? And the last thing is, could I find something good to say about them? And if you want to do an exercise, let me see. Oh, yeah, good. Ladies, you can do this easily. Take your hairband, put it on your wrist. And guys, find a hairband. Ask your wife for a hairband or go buy one. You put it on your wrist, right? Every time you criticize, you go like this. It actually hurts. And you think this is funny, but it actually works, because every time you criticize, you're going to have to do this. And I've done this before, and I was about to criticize, and I thought, oh, I have this band on my wrist. I don't want to have to do this. And it's a reminder. You know how many times a day we criticize? You'll find out when you put this on your wrist. And if your wrist becomes red, you've been doing it a lot. And it's so red. My wrist is so red today, I can't criticize for a week. It hurts too much. There was a church that did this. They did this exercise. You can try it. It works. But I think that's one of the most important points, is that it says more about us than it does about them. Isn't that a good point? Like, I need to criticize. Okay, this person, whatever. We all know this person is just an old crabby devotee. He complains about everything and everybody. But why do I need to complain about him complaining? That's interesting. I'm complaining about his complaining. What's wrong with me? Why do I need to do that? So that's what I would suggest. Introspect. Well, I'm not suggesting that Bhakti Siddhanta suggests. I'm just repeating. I hope that helps. Tanisha, it's a starting point anyway. I have some articles on this also. If you go to my website, mahatmadas.com, and if you look under articles, newsletters, I forget the title. Yeah, one is called Proudly Bowing Down to Maya. Proudly bowing down to, like, we're so proud, but we're bowing to Maya. It's about humility. You could humbly bow to Krishna or proudly bow to Maya. It's your choice. So we have a question from, and I can't pronounce your name, unfortunately. And if I try, I'm going to blotch it up. So I'll say your last name. I think that's easier. Mr. Dumpkin. Mr. Bhakti V. Dumpkin.
We call him Seva. Seva. Sevalot. It's a short name in Russian itself. For proper name is Seva. So it's quite Vaishnava name.
Seva. Okay. Bhakti Seva. You mentioned the attitude of some devotees who want others to listen to them, or otherwise they will not be satisfied. What if that devotee is in some administrative role and bears the responsibility? to what extent such a demanding attitude is acceptable and perhaps even necessary? In other words, should the manager ever let go and leave some things for Krishna to sort out, or to say if they have done the best effort, or should they take a hard line towards the devotees if that is necessary to accomplish their service as a manager? Well, I could give a general principle, but every specific situation is different. But if you are a man, let's talk about not a manager. Let's talk about you being a manager. If you are a manager and you want to get someone to do something, you don't get out a gun and say, Prabhu, do it or die. That's not the Hare Krishna movement. Prabhupada said, our movement is a volunteer movement and you can't force anybody to do anything. Now, of course, if someone's living in a temple, they have to do something. They can't just live there and eat prasadam and sleep all day, obviously. So there are standards which we expect. But how do we get people to follow those standards? We have a nice temple program. We have nice classes, nice kirtans, nice prasadam, good association. They're inspired. So leaders should inspire. Secondly, a leader should not feel entitled. Because I'm a leader, you have to do whatever I say. What if what I say isn't right? What if a devotee has doubt? What if I tell a devotee you have to go on Sankirtan and they'll say I'll have a nervous breakdown if I go on Sankirtan. I'm an introvert on steroids. Then as a leader, you say, okay, can you drive the devotees out on Sankirtan and pick them up? Yeah. So we have to be sensitive as leaders to devotees' desire, devotees' abilities or lack of them, and so forth. And the devotees themselves have to be sensitive to the leader's responsibilities to maintain the temple, because obviously we have to do things. So it's a bit of give and take, but I'm the leader, you have to do what I say. That's more of an attitude for the follower than the leader. The follower, Prabhupada said, work with your leaders, do what they ask you. Okay. But now when I become a leader and say, well, everyone has to do what I say, it doesn't work so well. But rather, we try to inspire them. We try to understand what they want to do, what inspires them, what service. And we have to listen to them and see what's going on in their life and how they feel about things. And so that's a general answer. So sometimes it's going to be more on the sympathetic side. Sometimes it's going to be more on the strict side. Like, Rath Yatra starts in a half an hour. Prabhu, we need you to do this. I don't really feel like it. No, well, Prabhu, you're the only one to do this. And if you don't do it, we don't have Rath Yatra. So, what do you say? Can I force you to do it right now? So sometimes you have to be like that, obviously. And other times there's more leeway. Right? So it's not entirely one way or the other, but my message to leaders is don't feel just because you're a leader, everyone is going to do what you say, but try to be the kind of leader that everybody wants to do what you say. They're inspired by your vision, by everything about you. I hope that answers the question, but it's so general. If you gave a specific, I could, give more advice if needed. What if the problem itself is with the management? Then you have to figure out how that can be communicated. And in some cases, managers don't want your opinion. So then what do? Then you just have to serve in your capacity in the way you can best serve, and the management will do what it does. You have anyone who wants to communicate with the management has to think what would be the best way to communicate what they see as a problem. And sometimes that's done by communicating with one of the managers who you're closest with, who may be more sympathetic to you, and saying, I think this is the problem. He agrees. Okay, can this be spoken about? Can something be done? Or you have to become part of the management sometimes. Sometimes you can't change unless you become part of it. So And I don't know exactly your situation, but sometimes even your guru can't change something. Even the GBC can't change something. So that's also sometimes a reality. Sometimes even Prabhupada couldn't change something. People wouldn't. His own disciples wouldn't always do what he asked them to do. So we have another question from the three devotees in New Vrindavan. Do you have a name for yourself? The three gopis, or what? The three Brajbasis? What do you call yourself? You call yourself Brajbasis? New Vrindavan. The three new Brajbasis. Yeah. Okay. I often find myself in a situation where a devotee is venting about someone. I want to be a good listener and usually subtly defend the devotee being criticized, but I don't always change the mind of the devotee criticizing. How I gently hold on. Navigate. How can I gently navigate that situation without being? And I have to rewind a little bit. I would have to state something implicit in the question that you didn't ask. Listening to a devotee who has problems, if you listen and don't say anything other than the only thing you say is there anything more you want to say? And when they finally say there's nothing more I want to say, you ask, is there anything more that you feel? And let them express what they're feeling. And when they finish, you ask again, is there anything more you feel? And when there's nothing more, the conversation is ended and you didn't say anything other than those two things. Why would you do that? You would do that because you want to offer a facility for that devotee to be able to speak and work things out in their mind and heart by you being a listener. All of us who give class know that our classes are better in some places than others because the devotees in some places are more eager to listen than others. And wherever they're more eager, they draw things out of you. Have you ever given a class, someone's like putting stamps on letters, someone's making a garland, someone's grinding sandalwood, someone's making jewelry for the deities, someone's on their computer? And it's like, it's hard to give a good class in that environment. But if you're given a class and people go, wow, we're waiting for you to give class, we love, and they're all sitting in front, the big eyes like as big as Lord Jagannath. And then you give this amazing class, you don't even know how you said what you said. It was like, it was drawn out by their need to hear. So in the same way, if you give attention to somebody who's speaking, you show interest, and they have confidence in you that this is, you're not going to tell anybody, you're not going to judge them, they oftentimes can work out the problem themselves. And I have an example of this. And it's obviously easier when they're not talking about another devotee, because now you have to sit and listen to that devotee being criticized. And as we just said, as a principle of Vaishnava behavior, you don't want to do that because it can harm you. However, sometimes for some devotees, that's the only way they're going to work through it, is you listen. But if you feel the devotee is not actually ill-motivated in their criticism, they're trying to work out their own issues in relation to the devotee, they don't really want to put them down. They're not really against them. They just are upset by that devotee's actions. Then it's not actually criticism or blasphemy. You could hear some crying of the heart. You could hear something else other than criticism. Then you can listen to it. And I have experience of this. A devotee I have two experiences of this. Just even, I mean, I knew I should listen. One devotee was criticizing on and 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 on. I didn't say anything. We were together. We were traveling together. The next day, after criticizing, you know what he said? He said, actually, I'm just being critical. It's just my fault. The same exact thing happened another time. It's actually when I was in New Vrindavan. I was staying with a devotee. And he was saying the same thing. And the next day he said, I'm just being critical. Actually, I should just improve myself. The same thing. And I was just listening. So there is a place for listening when you can tell it's like the devotee is conflicted or the devotee they're trying to sort it out themselves. And they're not really critical. If you can listen and let them talk, in many cases, they'll resolve the problem. If not that day, the next day. Now, having said that, I've studied this a bit, and there is a situation in which when you want to listen to someone and someone is criticizing another person in a way that you sense that this is more than it's just them crying out for help and trying to solve this problem, but they're trying basically to destroy this other devotee, and it's destroying you. You just say, sorry, Prabhu, I can't listen. This is not healthy for me. It's not healthy for you. I'm sorry, So those are two examples, and I'm sure there's a lot of other examples in the middle, which is the devotee wants to talk, and maybe it's getting a little too critical. You might want to stop and just say, Can we discuss this so we could try to help you overcome these ill feelings you have? I mean, is that why we're talking? Do you want to overcome these ill feelings? Because if they say yes, then there's some room. But if they say no, then you don't want to sit around and listen if that's not the intention. So, I mean, there may be so many examples of this. That's just, that's some idea. Probably bowing down to Maya. If you go to the chat, you'll see you can connect to that. Okay. So it's 1 hour and 25 minutes. How long do your classes normally go? Oh, you have to unmute.
I guess,
Oh,
yeah. I guess this is a good time. Usually we go maximum to 5:30. So we've been.
What time is it? 5:25 for you?
Yeah, 5:26. Yes.
Yeah. So let me just kind of put some icing or a summary on the cake. There's two things I talked about, how criticism personally affects us and how criticism personally affects the culture. And so one of the things that I've tried to do with the devotees for whom I have some influence over is talk a lot about what kind of culture we want to create. Because really we want to create a culture where we're glorifying devotees, because that's part of our culture as Vaishnavas. That's Vaishnava culture, appreciation and glorification. And so if we look at criticism in the context of culture, it has many negative ramifications on us as a community, as individuals, and specifically on people who will join our community in the future. Because one thing that I think is important for all of us who live in temples or in communities is to think about the future. What kind of culture are we creating for the people in the future who will come here? Because the culture teaches people. And if you have a culture in which if you try to criticize someone, nobody will listen, and people say, I don't listen to that, pretty soon you'll get the idea that in this community, they really esteem appreciation and they disparage criticism. So the people, even if they're critical and grumpy by nature, They either leave because they don't find anyone to grump to, or they'll change. Whereas if we, I think you might have seen this. Some person's brand new, they're a guest, and some devotee starts talking to them and complaining about the temple. Have you ever seen that? Yeah, it's like could you pick anything worse to talk about to a new person than that? I don't think so. So I have seen devotees who said, I've heard, that I was not a critical person, but when I joined ISKCON, I became critical because there was so much criticism going on. And as I said, religious movements lend themselves to judgmentalism, and which is just a kind of criticism, because we have high standards and we expect so much from one another. So if you're not a critical person, you join ISKCON and you learn how to become critical, what could be worse than that? How have we failed Prabhupada? We've created a movement where people become worse in some ways. So those are some concerns, I think, that can help us individually do better, and as a community support one another in being more positive in our attitudes and our dealings. And I'll give you one story. This is a beautiful story, and we'll end with this story. We've got 1 minute, right? So I was giving a forgiveness workshop in the hospital, Bhakti Hospital in Mumbai. Our workshops are 2 days. We go maybe 8 hours a day and take off an hour for lunch. So it's like 14 hours of workshops. Yeah, something like 10, like 14 hours. And some people don't actually finally let it go to like the last 3 minutes. So I was in the hospital, and the class was like scheduled for 10 or 11, but a lot of the doctors and nurses couldn't come. They were busy. So they said, we're going to have to start later. But there were already like half the audience was there. So I said, okay, well, I'll just give a little talk, not on something that I would normally talk about in the forgiveness workshop, but something that I have realized about forgiveness and I wanted to share with them. And what we do in the forgiveness workshop is we write our story down. Like, this person did this to me and I was hurt and so on. So we have it on a piece of paper. And then I tell them at any time during the workshop, you want to give up your resentment, just come up and tear the paper. And we have a place where you put the paper, which represents a fire pit. We'll burn it. We burn it at the end. So if you want to let it go, you just tear it up. Like, okay, it's gone forever. It's kind of a psychological device, You have a problem, write it down, tear it up, burn it, it's gone. It actually works amazingly. I didn't even know that. I just thought of it, and I later found out it was a psychological device. But the point was that after I gave the lecture, it was just a talk for like an hour on why devotees should be forgiving, the place of forgiveness. It was more of a philosophical talk. 90% of the devotees got up and tore the paper, which was unprecedented in all the workshops I did, because as I said, some devotees don't tear it up till the very end. And then I was talking to a devotee. I said, how did this happen? He said, well, Niranjana Swami is always talking about forgiveness, compassion, humility, like that. So they already have the culture. So when you talked about it, they were already sitting on the fence, and you basically just blew them over. Isn't that interesting? What you create when you create a culture where you're talking about these things all the time, and the leaders are always showing respect to everyone, always glorifying everyone, so the people under them start doing it, the new people who join start doing it. That's what we want to create. So we have a course online on forgiveness. We actually have 2 courses, a foundational and intensive course, and then the information is there. And this is a self-paced course. We're also considering at some point combining the self-paced with regular meetings where we can discuss it. The course, I think, is a a really good course. It's rare that people take it and don't let go of their issue. And I put a lot of work into it, and hopefully by taking it, you'll kind of end up like I did. It's like, why would I want to be resentful when I'm trying to be sattvic and shoot a sattvic? It's like there's no place for it. It does. Like, why do I want to hurt myself by being resentful? And so if you come to that realization, it's very easy to let it go, because it's not part of the path of Krishna consciousness. Tamagun is not part of the path of Krishna consciousness, and resentment is very tamasic. So hopefully you'll take the course and have that realization. And you can use it on yourself. If you have self-forgiveness issues, then you do the course on yourself and forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for being yourself. I forgive you myself for being you. Okay, fantastic. Now you can live with yourself, be happy. And when you forgive yourself, you can forgive others more easily, right? I have to tell you something amazing. We did a japa retreat level 2. And in level 2, we have a section on self-care. Like japa is like a very high form of self-care. And it was like a therapy session when we chanted in that mood of self-care, because so many devotees don't really care enough about themselves. It was amazing. The realizations I got, I thought this was like psychotherapy. And it was just japa in the mood of this sadhana is self-care. It's quite interesting. So that's something for you to meditate on as well. Thank you all for being here. And it was nice, always nice being with you. Better to be with you in Mayapur, but I don't think many of you are in Mayapur, right?
Yeah,
Not many, right?
I think from devotees whom we have here, other than me, none isn't. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Okay.
We are planning to do a residential course maybe from the 1st of December, or maybe from the 15th of December for 2 months. Let's see. Still
Okay.
kind of wrestling with that, with your blessings.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Yeah.
See what happens.
Okay.
Thank you
Hare
very
Krishna
much,
too.
dear Mahatma Prabhu.
You're
for
welcome.
Always
My
coming
pleasure.
and giving your association, and always have a wonderful topics and realizations and wisdom. So looking forward to having your association sometime soon.
Okay, fantastic.
Haribol.
Haribol.
Srila Prabhupada ki. Jai.
Jai.